All right, we're back, and it is COMP1006 Intro to Web Development and Programming here at Georgian College. We're in the winter 2017 semester. It's week 2, part 1 of our broadcast. I want to go over some of the stuff we talked about last week. Now, assumptions that I have to make for people who weren't here. Anyone not here last week? Right. So people who weren't here last week, there was a big setup week that we did last week, right? So if you missed last week, please look at the videos. Wait a minute, Tom, you're going to say, where are the videos? They're on YouTube. And where are they? Well, you need to join the Slack channel because I'm going to put up all my links right now again, right? So how do I join Slack? You go to comp1006-w2017.slack.com and you join the group with your Georgian College email, right? So I'm using Slack as a way of communicating with you and Blackboard as a way of having all of our PowerPoints and stuff like that with me on Blackboard as well as assignments, yes. Either one. If it's either student.georgianc.on.ca or mygeorgian.ca or georgiancollege.ca. Any one of those is fine, right? So whichever one you want to use. Okay, so you're on Slack, and I'm assuming that you have Slack access, right? And I'm going to put the website for the YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel is on YouTube, and then again, it's my first initial last name or my first name last name, right? So I'm going to grab that and put it into Slack. So this is my YouTube channel. Again, I record all my videos. So if you miss a week, you didn't miss necessarily, although there's lots of work that I do every single week. Last week was really important because we did some setup. But traditionally, within the first couple of weeks, some people don't show up in the first week because of schedule changes and a bunch of different things like that. So I'm going to repeat some of the stuff I did last week, this week again, only so that way we can be on track, right? Okay, things I assumed that you've installed. And I know some people were with me last week. We kind of had some people come with me in B230, right? By the way, we've made some assumptions. And the assumption is that we're going to run this class for 2 hours, and that's it. After the class is done, I'm going to scoot to B230 for those people who are interested if you need extra help. All right, so we're going to use that extra hour for one-on-one time, extra help, that kind of stuff. It's not mandatory. So if you want to scoot and go home after that, it's up to you. That's what we decided last week, right? So if you need to join me, B230 is where I'm going to be. So I'm going to be in B230 after 5 p.m., right? Because this goes from 3 to 5, right? And then from 5 to 6, I'll be there if I need to be. If no one shows up, I'll take off, just like you guys, right? So that's kind of a message. You can message me directly if you need to with Slack. You don't have to know my cell phone number. I don't need to know your cell phone number. Set up Slack, please, on your cell phone as well as your desktop computer, so you have communication with me and with other people in the class if you need to. You can do direct messaging. If you don't see these people here, I see them all because I'm the Slack channel owner, but you can always go through here under directory to see everybody that's signed up, okay? And send them direct messages if you want to, okay? A little bit about Slack. Okay, so assumptions. So after 5, this class ends at 5. No one comes with me to B230, see ya, right? If you need help, I go there and we talk one-on-one and I help you do things like installations and other kinds of things. I have no issues with this. There are going to be times where we need to do it, right? I'm not going to force anybody as a class to go there. This is just your help one-on-one with me. You can use that extra hour on your own. I can give it back to you for starting your schoolwork. If I give you an assignment, trying to do that kind of stuff, right? You have an extra hour to do that. Otherwise, you'd be here and you do it in class. It's the same thing. We can also all walk over there as an option. That was the other option we discussed. If you really feel like going over there as a group, we'll all go over there and spend the remaining hour together, and I can go over other concepts if you somehow something goes wrong. For the exam, if we do the exam, which is going to be the midterms, it's going to be a midterm exam and a final exam. The midterm test, if you will, or exam, it can't be more than 2 hours, right? So I'm going to have to bill it for about an hour. Right? I'm gonna build it for an hour. If it takes you 2 hours, that's okay. But after 2 hours, the time is up. You can't go to B230 and continue, right? Because that'll be your exam day, right? The only day that I ask you're fully on time and ready to go is on the exams. for both week 7 and week 14. Those are the 2 exam dates that we're going to have, right? And please be here on time because I'm going to start promptly, right? Because we don't have a lot of time, not because I don't want to include everybody or whatever, right? Okay, so assumptions. I assume, and here's, what happens when you assume, right? Bad things happen, right? But let's assume a couple things. I assume you downloaded WAMP last week, right? WAMP. WAMP server is what it is. WAMP server is a little app that allows us to run in our local environment, right? It allows us to run a PHP server in a local environment. I'm having some little issues here, but I will refresh the screen. There it is. I can download WAMP, right? And I recommend the 64-bit version, not the 32-bit version. It comes with Apache 2.4.23, PHP 5.6 and 7. We're going to use PHP 7 in this course because 5.4 has been it's going to be officially dead over the next little while, right? And they're moving towards 7 as of this release, right? 7. And I'll tell you how to configure WAMP in a second. We did that with some of the people that came with me to B230 last week, and I'll do it with the rest of you. By the way, those people that came with me, right? And you know who you are, right? If your partners on the table have issues or in the class, feel free to help, all right? Because it'll just slow us down if I do it all myself, okay? So you guys are my evangelists for this week, right? Next week it'll be somebody else, I'm sure. All right, so we downloaded WAMP server. We also installed Node.js. Let me just put the link for WAMP server on here. So I'm going to take WAMP server and drop it into Slack. So here's WAMP server, WAMP server. WAMP stands for Windows, Apache MySQL, and PHP server. That's what it is. So WAMP server. And we also downloaded and installed Node.js, right? That's the other tool. So Node.js, installed that, right? We installed Node, right? We also are using Visual Studio Code. These are all assumptions. Although we may move later on to PHP Storm, because it's a better piece of code for this, it looks like. Let's take a look. It's not a bad emulator or whatever, or editor, but so this is VS Code. And there's VS Code for you. We're going to use VS Code for these examples, right? I also asked you to sign up for Git and GitHub, right? So download and install Git and GitHub. So GitHub, please sign up for GitHub, right? And my GitHub link for this course and for all courses at Georgian is Georgian College. So github.com/Georgian College. I stole, I have to say, or snatched the organization nicely, right? So it's mine, right? Luckily, so you can grab that and put that on GitHub. So GitHub link, right, for the course. And that means all my code archive, everything that I do here locally with you guys is going to be mirrored up on GitHub. You need to set up yourself with a GitHub account because every assignment starting next week is going to have a Git requirement, right? There's going to be a GitHub requirement. Does anyone not have a GitHub account? Anybody not have a GitHub account? If you don't, get a GitHub account today. Don't wait till later if you don't have a GitHub account because you need one for your assignments, right? And when you do things with client side, we did, if you did advanced web programming one day with Rich, you're going to need it, right? If you're going to do rapid application development, if you haven't done that already, you're going to need it. Did you do rapid application development already? No? That's coming, right? If you're going to do things like enterprise computing, you're going to need it. Every time we do stuff, any kind of computing that we do together, for the most part, all of the professors, we use Git and GitHub, right? As you move forward. So please sign up for Git and GitHub. What's the difference between Git and GitHub? I talked about Git and GitHub. What is the difference?
Well, I was wondering myself.
Okay. Anyone else have an idea of what Git and GitHub is? Don't answer. Yeah. Love it. Great answer. That's perfect answer. So GitHub is the cloud service and Git is a local service or a local revision control system that we install as an application on our system. It's only local to our system. It's locked into our system. If I use Git on my system, You can't access it. It's only on my system. I unlock, the potential of it by sharing it with you on GitHub. And those are the 3 reasons why we use it, right? We use GitHub for, what are the 3 reasons? I said you can answer this time. Backup. Collaboration. Version control. Those are the reasons why we use it, right? Those are good answers. And if I ever quiz you, hint, hint, right? It's going to be on the bloody quiz, the exact question, right? Because that's why we use Git. We use GitHub and Git for that reason, right? And we do it because there's never come a time in my life where I haven't said, like I said to you last time, I don't know what happened. It worked now, but it worked before, but it doesn't work now, right? Or, oh man, my computer broke. Or I forgot my code. I don't have my code with me. Where can I get it? GitHub. I also introduced a number of different editors as an option. Visual Studio Code was the one I'm going to use, but one of the recommendations that we're talking about lately because of some problems that I encountered last time was PHP Storm. Right? So again, PHP Storm is available free for students for a year, and you can renew. It's a very good editor when it comes to PHP. The other option you might want to think about on the web, and I'll kind of get that link for you. Sorry, I gotta remember to put that link in Slack. So PHP Storm. The other one is, which I recommend a lot, is Cloud9. Right? Cloud9 is a fully online cloud-based IDE with no installation requirements whatsoever. It's got support for all kinds of languages. It also has a built-in terminal, a little Ubuntu server inside of it, and in terms of installation and config, it's minimal. It also links together with GitHub as well as Bitbucket if you're a Bitbucket user. All right, so we talked about that. Let me just put that in there as well. So Cloud9, IDE, that's what it is. It's not a bad choice either. And I'll show you at some point in the course, I'll show you how Cloud9 works. It's kind of cool. Cloud9. Okay, so we talked about all these things last week. Any questions so far about this stuff? So basically all set up, right? Now notice I'm working on a Mac. Yes. You got to send them a note. There is a area there for PHP Storm for Education. If you go through here, right? See how they have the 30-day trial? You don't want to do that. If you scroll down, there is a section that is for education. I forget where it is. Down near the bottom somewhere. And you can send them a note. I wish I had the link. I would give it to you. Right? But if you Google it, if you say PHP Storm for Education, classroom license. There we go. That's a classroom. There's also the student license. That's the classroom license. That's not what I want. I want a student program. There we go. For students, how to renew and how to get a student license. And there it is. And you can get all the products, including PHP Storm and WebStorm, which is awesome too, for free for a year. So how about I put that one in there instead? So I'll say, now this is the great thing is you can modify the links you put on Slack as well. So I can kind of do an edit, right? So PHP Storm, and I can put in there, sorry, let me try that again, for students. So I can replace that link with something else. Here we go. Okay, so PHP Storm. We talked about different editors. We also talked about PHP, how it is a back-end server-side language that is unstructured and that I don't like it, right? I told you guys that. I said it not because I think it's a totally bad language. It's just that it's been abused over the many years that it's been out, right? It's gone through a lot of iterations and transformations, right? I'm going to talk about how, and I put up a PowerPoint, I think, up online, how PHP is an embedded language. It was meant to be embedded in our code, which nowadays is frowned upon, right? We don't want embedded, script in our code. That makes it so that it's not reusable as much, right, as code that we call from a file. We can reuse over and over again, right? So the original thought process behind creating a PHP language was a quick and easy server-side scripting language that mimicked, in some ways, JavaScript, believe it or not, and other languages of the time, right? It was very C influenced, a C influenced language, so it's very C-like, but it's not C. There's some things that it doesn't do. And it has dynamic typing, right? So, or it's a loosely typed language, if you want to say it that way, right? As opposed to a strictly typed language. So there is no data types that are strict in PHP, just like JavaScript, the original JavaScript. Now you can add a structure to PHP with different frameworks, right? Like Laravel. And we're going to get into that probably near the end of the course, if we can. Laravel is a PHP a web framework. That's just for web artisans. But what it actually does is it allows us to extend the whole class idea and create object-oriented PHP, right? So we're going to get there. First, we learn to walk, then we fly, right? Okay. But one of the main reasons why we use PHP is for data access. It has a tight link with MySQL, which is an open source SQL server, right? That's what it is, right? We can't call it SQL because people would kill me, get mad at me in the SQL world. But really what it is a structured query language based database, MySQL, which is open source and we can access it. Now I'm using a Mac, right? And I can certainly download and install MAMP, M-A-M-P, right? That's the Mac version of WAMP, so to speak. Not exactly, right? There's MAMP and MAMP Pro, right, that you can download and install if you're a Mac user. You don't have to use the Windows WAMP if you don't need to, right? And it does the exact same thing. It still has the AMP stack, Apache MySQL and PHP, MySQL and PHP. I got to keep saying it differently because people are going to get mad at me, especially on the video, right? All right, so that is the options. Now, if I set up things, and I'm just going to use my my VMware to virtualize Windows. So here's my VMware Fusion. If you're a Mac user, VMware Fusion I recommend highly over Parallels or VirtualBox. That's just me. I've used this for a long time, and I find it a little bit more stable and performant. But that's just, you know, if you're not a Mac user, how many Mac users are in the room? One, right? That's the same guy who doesn't know Star Wars and you know, stuff. So forgive me when I say that because I'm the other Mac user, right? So I used to be, like I said, I used to be a Windows user for years, but I find it's a more stable platform when it comes to work. What was that? I'm just saying, right? Anyway, so if you look at this, we downloaded and installed WAMP. Did anyone have any difficulty installing WAMP last week, right? If you installed WAMP, did anyone have any problems? You guys are all golden?
I think.
Yes.
I'll just say on my computer, the MySQL workbench or whatever uses the same port.
You got to stop it. You got to kill MySQL workbench, or else your PHP MyAdmin won't work, and your, you know, the port will be messed up.
Yeah, I actually, even with closing it, I had to go into my services.
Yeah, you have to shut it down. Yeah, and or remove it altogether, right? Shut it down in the services if it's a conflict. Okay, so I'm going to launch WAMP. I'm going to assume that you guys have WAMP installed. Remember, I made some assumptions. Here's and assumptions are bad. But let me launch WAMP for a second and see what happens. So how do I do that? I'm going to search for WAMP here in Windows. If I don't have it, it's on the top, but I'm going to search for it anyway. I'm just going to type in WAMP. Here's WAMP server, and I'm going to start it. It's going to ask me if I want to start this thing. I'm going to say yes. I'm on the Windows side. A little bit of a window. Notice it's hidden inside here. Mine looks a little different than yours, yeah?
Yes, it does.
All right, here's the difference. Mine's green, and if yours is red, that's bad, right? Red means there's a conflict in your ports. Orange means there's a conflict in one of your ports, right? Okay? So if I go here, if I right-click, by the way, if you notice there's a little thing that, some other options. If you look at some WAMP settings, notice that I have a couple of extra check marks here, right? One of the check marks is allow virtual host local IPs other than 127.0.0 because I want to open it up so I can use it on my Mac too, right? The same server, by the way, right? Another one is this one, which is menu item online, offline. I want to be able to turn it online or take it offline, right? So I just added those two things. That's the only changes I made there. Okay. Now I'm going to click away and click back. Now if I click a left click on, that was when I right clicked. When I left click on it, I get this little menu. And notice that my WAMP server version is 3.0.6. Yours should be the same at this point. So I just installed it, right? I have a couple of options. I can restart all services. Hey, with PHP and you and me, oh, I hate to do that. What a rhyme. I didn't make that, right? We're going to restart services a lot, right? Because every time we change PHP, in order for it to kick off, we need to restart services over and over again. PHP is run on the server. So if I make change to server-side code, it won't remember and won't do anything unless I restart my services. Yes? Sorry?
Yeah, because on XAMPP, you just throw your files to a folder and do this progression.
We're using WAMP, buddy, not XAMPP.
Yeah, I know, but
And we're using WAMP because it mirrors what it's like in the real world when you're going up online. It doesn't work like that. When you upload something, a back-end service on the real world, you have to restart the server, right? Unless you can't do it, and you have to use an HT access file, which we're going to talk about as well. That's another way of doing it without restarting anything. For now, I want you to use WAMP, not XAMPP, because you'll have the same experience as me, all right? If you're a Mac user, you can use WAMP, or MAMP, I'm saying. MAMP is fine. It'll be a little bit different from a setup perspective. I'm not going to go over it because there's only two of us, all right? All right, when you launch, right, and you want to see some services, notice that when I go into my WAMP server, right, I have some options. One of them is, if I go to Apache, this is part of the AMP stack, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, MySQL and PHP, Apache. Notice my version is 2.4.23. That's what's set. That's the only version that's available. However, you can download other versions of your Apache server if you want to. Right? That is the server itself, the web server. That's what does all the routing for you and everything else, Apache. Okay? Notice also I have service administration, where I can stop my service and restart my service. Just the Apache service. Probably would never do this. Okay, the other one is all the modules that are launched in Apache. These are all the modules that are active. You can turn these modules off and on for compatibility issues, especially when running things like WordPress, which we're going to do at this course at some point. Alias directories. I've set up a couple of them. One is COMP1006, and the other one is my PHP demo. And the way to do that, of course, is you click Add an Alias and follow the instructions. You have to point to a particular path. And my paths are this one, COMP1006, and a PHP demo, which is these two paths. Okay, well, let's keep going. Other things in Apache, right? You have something called HTTP conf, right? Now, this is not a WAMP course or how to install Apache MySQL and PHP, Apache MySQL and PHP. It's not that, right? But if you notice, right, it says HTTP conf. This is the configuration file for your server, and it's a file you can edit with the text editor, all right? Like edit or Visual Studio Code, whatever you want. Okay, that's one. PHP. Here's where we differ. There are two versions of PHP installed by default with WAMP. One of them is 5.625, and the other one is 7.0.10. Please change to 7.0.10 or 7.0. whatever X when you downloaded it, because we're using 7 here. If we all use the same version of PHP, which means some of our functionality is going to be the same. There are going to be some functions, not all, that are not supported in the old version of PHP, right? And I want to talk about those new functions. However, all of the old functions are supported going forward, which is good. Also, I have PHP settings, and I can turn things off or on in PHP, add additional memory, and so on. We're not going to fool with this right away. There's also PHP extensions we can add. These are like plugins to make PHP more kind of extend the functionality of PHP, add things or subtract things, and make things more compatible or less compatible depending on the system requirements that you have. Now, you probably will never do any of this stuff in real life. In real life, you'll just go up to a service like Microsoft Azure, create a new web app, upload your files, and you're good to go. You won't have to worry about any of this stuff, right? The administrators take care of this. But if you ever need to administrate a server, this is a good example of all the different plugins and everything else that are built in. Other things we have to look at is php.ini. This is the kind of a config file for PHP. Again, we can access this with or edit it with the editor, right? MySQL. My version is 5.7.14. We can also do service administration for this, turning off and on. And there's my.ini, which manages the MySQL configuration. Notice that there's a www directory. The default is www, and it exists in my installation folder. If I look at my installation folder, if I look at my PC, right? And if I look at the C drive, when my virtual machine catches up to me. Yay. Here's my C drive. And if I look at my installation folder, it is under WAMP64. Underneath that, you have a www folder. This www folder is where it looks first. The server looks here for all of your web projects, right? Unless you specify them as aliases in your Apache server, where you can kind of tell your server to look in different places, and this is fine. But if you were to drag and drop a folder into here, it would become available to you in PHP. And we'll talk about how to do that. All right, it's a little bit about the server architecture, right? What else? What else can I do here? So here's my virtual hosts. You can see it's localhost. If I click on localhost, it's going to bring up a browser window that goes to localhost, which is 127.0.0.1, and that's port 80. If you did it properly. Let me show you what it looks like. It looks like this. And notice this is my server configuration. It tells me the server version, 7.0.10, as well as my aliases and any projects that I have in the www folder, right, which you can access here. Okay, simple enough. Am I going too slow? I gotta talk about this stuff because some people are like, if I go too fast, I've never been accused of going slow. So
No, I like this.
if I go any faster than this, you know, I kind of have, I only have really two speeds, right? Too slow and way too fast. All right, so this is the page that we get by default. I can also type in here, and this is something we're going to be using a lot when we do programming. I'm going to be using PHP myadmin. So if I type in PHP, notice I've already done this, myadmin, and press enter, we're going to come up with this page. If your MySQL database is working, and if you type this address, localhost PHP myadmin, and if I'm going to copy this and put it inside Slack, so I'm going to copy it and go to Slack, and this is the PHP myadmin page, right? PHP myadmin, right? When you go there, localhost PHP myadmin, you pull up this page, and the default username is root. Okay, root is the default version name or username. If I press no password, if I press go, I can go into the MySQL administration page. Right, this is how I create a database with the MySQL server. Right, how I create users if I need to. Right, I can add tables to the database, configure the database, destroy the database, import a database, export a database, do all kinds of stuff here with PHP myadmin. PHP myadmin is your friend, right? Because this is the thing that's going to save us. And by the way, if you know PHP myadmin, it's very similar to Visual Studio. There's a Visual Studio version of that's a SQL Server Management Studio. If you guys know SQL Server at all, it's very simple. When you guys learn SQL Server, PHP myadmin and SQL Server Management Studio, there's a few similarities there. One of the things that I want you to do from the get-go when you build this up is create a new user, please. So I want to go into, and if you look at the menus here on the top, right? I want to set up a new user. I'm going to go to notice there's more, right? There's settings, import, export, user accounts. There's the one I want to look at, right? And I've already set mine up as Thomas, right? You can set yours up as whatever you want. Here's how you do it. I click new. So add a new user right down here on the new section. You're going to put your username in here. Like, for example, John, right? And the host name, leave alone. The password, you're going to put a password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. and retype that password. Now here's the key to this whole thing, right? On the bottom, it says, this is a database for a user account, right? I want to create a database for the user account. Nah, I don't want that. I want this. I want global privileges for my user, for yourself. Click check all, right? So I want to check global privileges. And then way down here, press go. What this is going to do is it's going to generate a new user account. And notice that it is scripting the new user account right here. This is the actual script that's generating the user account at the top. This is structured query language. It's querying the server, the database server this time, and creating a new user. I'm making you do this because I don't want you to log into PHPMyAdmin as root. And we can't log in as root when we connect to the database later on in the course. We need to log in with a username and password. There has to be a password there, right? So that's why I'm getting you to set up your name or whatever you want for your account. Okay. Clear? When we use something like Microsoft Azure, right? One of the things we're going to be using is Microsoft Azure for MySQL, right? But you need to sign up for it in this course. And the way to sign up for Microsoft Azure in this course is to use E5 on the Hub, right? Which is our Georgian College discounts for Microsoft products. So if I go to Georgian College, Microsoft, it used to be called DreamSpark, and now it's called Microsoft Imagine. I'm going to copy this link and put it on Slack. So this is Microsoft Imagine software discounts for Georgian. Usually they're free, by the way. That includes things like Visual Studio and a bunch of other ones. I'm pointing this out to you because if you go to Microsoft Imagine, on the top left, you can sign up for Microsoft Azure, which is a cloud service that is free for students for a year, right? When you sign up for Microsoft Azure, if it ever asks you for an Outlook account or some kind of Microsoft account, please pop into incognito mode, all right? The way to sign up for Microsoft Imagine and Microsoft Azure is all through incognito mode. If you use your regular browser, Chrome or Firefox, and you don't go into incognito mode or private mode, what's going to happen is it's going to remember you, it's going to think that you're a Georgian student, and it's going to try and use your Georgian college email, which will fail. And then what's going to happen is it's going to ask you for money, right? Like, sign up, give me your credit card information, or else we're not going to give you access to Azure. That is wrong. If you get, like, please give me your credit card information, you did something, right? So use incognito mode to sign up for Azure, all right? And make a new Microsoft account. If you already have a live account, you can certainly try and use that one. To be safe, make a brand new Microsoft Outlook account that has nothing to do with anything else, and you will have no issues, right? You can try. Did it work?
It took 3.5 classes to figure it out.
Right. I don't recommend that. They fixed some of it with this little link here, right? But Microsoft Azure, if you don't have access right now, get access, because in your assignments, right, we need to have access to some kind of PHP server live. So there's 3 things I'm going to ask you for on your assignments. Number 1, your project files, zipped up. I don't want RAR files. Please don't give me RAR files, okay? Second thing is a link to your GitHub, right? A link to your GitHub. And the third thing that I want is a link to some kind of cloud service or host. It could be DreamHost, someone else that has that supports PHP and MySQL, right? So that it's live. You make your sites. We're a web course. We do our sites live for our assignments, okay? So you're going to give me those links. I'm going to test it live. Microsoft Azure has a very good service, but there's a bit of you got to kick yourself a little bit to have access, right? If you've already signed up for Azure last semester, then you should be fine this semester. Emphasis on should, right? Doesn't mean that you will be. Okay, and the way to test that is to go to portal.azure.com, or if you've already have access, you should be able to log in here. And if I want to, I can create a web app. So I can go new, right? I'm going to go web and mobile, and I can create a web app, right? And the web app I can name, it could be a kind of an original name. It has to be for the Azure websites, right? And then later on, I can create a data store that I can hook into. Right? So if you don't have access to this, and if it takes you somewhere weird, or if it asks you, if you want to create a web app, if it asks you just to pay, your Microsoft Imagine or Microsoft Azure account is screwed up, right? Just saying, right? So you need to use something else like DreamHost. There's also the GitHub Student Pack for Education, which I talked about last week a little bit. I'm going to talk about it again, the GitHub Student Pack for Education. Right? It's this one, right? GitHub Student Pack gives you some extra stuff. And I'm going to put this up on Slack as well for those people who don't have it. So GitHub Student Pack. This GitHub Student Pack, the great thing about it is it gives you access to something like DigitalOcean. You can create your VMs. You get $50 credit. DigitalOcean is a Toronto shop that gives you, it's a cloud host in Toronto. That's something that you get for free. It also gives you the ability to have private GitHub repos, unlimited private GitHub repos, which I recommend as students. Instead of sharing your code publicly, you can have private GitHub repos to share with me and collaborate with me, right? So please do that. It's a free service that you can get as students, and you can certainly renew every year. Normally worth $7 a month, but it's unlimited private repos, which is really cool. And there's lots of other little things in here too. Look, they even talk about Microsoft Imagine here. As a student, you get it, no matter who you are, right? You also get a free SSL certificate from Namecheap and a domain name. However, be aware that you cannot point your domain name to Microsoft Azure unless it's paid for. You have to pay for the service to get, you know, that's an advanced service for them. Although SendGrid is really cool, you can use SendGrid, right, to send email from a form right through Microsoft Azure. It's a service that you can use. If you try to send email from a form without using SendGrid or some service, it will fail, right, because it's going to be blocked, right? Most cloud services have some kind of system online, and most people, a lot of times, people use SendGrid. So sign up for SendGrid, it's free. Questions so far about this? Is all review setup stuff we did last week, right? For some people who didn't do it or who weren't here for whatever reason, this is an opportunity for you to kind of get all the tools you need. Again, I've recorded this last week. You can go into more detail. I'm not going to go into it right now. Let's launch Visual Studio, right? And Visual Studio Code actually is what I'm using, right? And what I did last week, if you remember, is I had lesson 1. Now, normally I would start this over again, but I want to go over it with you because we only have 2 hours, right? So I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code. I'm going to drag and drop my lesson from last week in here to show you what it was, right? This is just a reminder of last week. We did a little bit of setup last week. Last week, what I did was I set up a basic HTML app, and I talked about how we need to convert this, right, from HTML to PHP on the back end. The actual extension cannot be HTML. It's got to be PHP. I'm going to continue with this from last week, right? And by the way, if you look up online on my GitHub account, there is this COMP1006 Winter 2017 Lesson 1. Just bear with me, and I'll make another one. I'll make you download Lesson 2. We'll go from there, right? So for me, I'm just going to duplicate this one. And I'm going to call it Lesson 2 with some changes. Here's Lesson 2. And I'm also going to make a folder for our course, so COMP 1006, where I'm going to put both of them. Inside there, now I have Lesson 2, right? I want to open up Visual Studio Code and drag and drop Lesson 2 in there. And now that I have Lesson 2 in there, I want to make sure that it's renamed Lesson 2. So this is a Hello World we did last time with a bit of a lorem ipsum, right? And I want to put this up on GitHub. Now, if you've set up GitHub correctly, last time the way we did it was we opened up our terminal or command prompt by right-clicking down here in Visual Studio Code, right? We brought up our command prompt, and people are allergic to command prompt because they look at it and they're like, oh my God, command prompt, and they don't want to use it. But the reality is that command prompt there's a lot of control that you have with command prompt compared to if you're using a tool, right? So with command prompt, notice that it took me right, or terminal, it took me right into my folder, and I need to do everything from here, okay? I also have a default .git folder because I made a copy. Notice I did a duplicate. I made a copy from lesson 1 to lesson 2. Well, that means I also duplicated my .git folder. If I do an ls-al, which is show me everything, right, in Linux language, right? Notice that I have this .git folder. This is on the Mac side. On the Windows side, you'd have to do a directory, dir, right? This .git folder on the Mac side, I got to get rid of, right? So on the Mac side, I got to do something like this. I got to say remove -rf, so I'm forcing it to go, .git. And then I do an ls-al, again, it's gone. On the Windows side of the house, let's go back to the Windows side of the house, right? Because most of us are Windows users, right? On the Windows side of the house, I have this COMP1006 folder, right? And I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to copy, right? Here's copy. And I want to paste, right? It creates a copy the same way as I did on the Mac, right? I'm also creating another folder here like I did last time, new folder called COMP1006. I'm going to pass on these two folders, this one and this one, when my VM speeds up one day. I'm going to pass these two folders, this one and this one. Oops, not those. This one and this one. I can't do them both on Windows. Into here. And in my folder structure, you can see that I'm going to rename this lesson 2. Now I got the same problem, but in Windows, it's better to do it through the UI. Right? User interface can show the .git folder easier. I can just erase it, delete. And now my lesson 2 does not have a .git folder. In Visual Studio Code, here's my Visual Studio Code. This is on the Windows side of the house, right? Yeah. I'm going to drag and drop my. This is what I get with Windows with Visual Studio Code. I drag and drop my lesson in here, and now you can see that I have. Here's my lesson, and I don't have a Git repository. I can open up in command prompt, if I kind of drag down here, and it opens up this command prompt. Now, I want to warn you that Visual Studio Code and other editors, you can choose whatever command line that you want to use. I'm using my command prompt, but you can certainly use git bash, right, if you want, right? Or you can also use PowerShell. And in Windows, I recommend PowerShell is the better environment because it gives you more feedback, and it's a bit of a nicer command prompt than regular command prompts. But here, what I want to do is I want to do git init. What are the 3 commands? This is the first one. Git init is the first command, right, with git. What's the second command for git on the command line? I want to do something. Don't say anything, right, because you've had me already, and I'm making you crazy with git, right? What's the second command I'm going to do? I've initialized my Git repository, and then what am I doing now? Huh? What'd you say?
Clone.
Clone? No.
Commit.
Commit? Who said commit? It's not commit. That's the third one. I need to do something before I commit. What do I need to do? Huh? I need to add the files. I got to do git add. Git add what? Git add dot. Git add dot adds all the files in my project to the staging area before it goes into my hidden .git folder, right? My hidden .git folder is where I'm keeping track of all my changes, where all my revision control happens, okay? Without my hidden .git folder, there's no revision control, okay? So this adds everything to my, I kind of almost like check mark all the files that are going to go into my hidden .git folder. Next, the third step is git commit -m for message, and the commit is a snapshot of the current state of my files. And then best practices is initial commit or first commit. You can use either one or the other. I can't make this bigger for now. Press enter. It's going to do something like this. So now locally, CLS, I can do something like git log, and it shows me that I have one commit locally. One commit. I've only done one commit, one snapshot of my files locally. That's all it's doing. It's keeping track of my files now. Okay, now, I want to connect this to GitHub. And the way to do that simply is to go to GitHub, go to Georgian College, create my repository. Now you can do it either up here with the plus or down here sometimes, right? And what I want to do is under Georgian College, I can go comp, it's got to be original, 1006, and then winter 2017, right? If I can type. And then lesson 2, and press enter. What this is going to do, it's going to create a public repository. If you want to make it private, there was an option for private. And I'm going to take these last 2 lines that it offers up. These just gives you instructions on how to do most of it, right? I'm going to copy. I'm going to go back to my command prompt. I'm going to right-click and paste. Sometimes right-clicking alone will do it. And then press enter. Now, if you've configured your credentials on your command line, it will just go. If you haven't configured your credentials, it'll ask you to log in. It'll ask you for your email address and your password. If you put them in correctly, it'll do this. Sometimes what we need to do is we need to git config. And for the first-time users, if I type in git config, right, there is a bit of first-time git setup that I recommend, right? I'll put this up on Slack, right? Here's Slack. So first-time git setup. And what this does is it tells you that you need to set up things like, oops, one more time. Things like your username and your email address and so on. That all has to be done on the command line. Now, you may not have to do this if you set up the GitHub desktop tool. If you set up the GitHub desktop tool, some of it's done for you. Okay, it sets up something called win credentials, right? So it doesn't do this anymore, right? Now, the biggest problem Windows users have with both Node.js and Git is what? It doesn't work, right? Yeah. Oh, they're on a Windows machine. Oh, you're gonna get shot, man. First you don't know D&D, now you're bashing the Windows stuff, right? Don't do it, man. Don't do it. There's more of them than us, okay? What's the reason? What's the real reason why? Why is there a problem with Git? Is that what? No, that's not an issue. Windows is great for that. I'm being facetious. No, what's the real reason? What Git and yes.
I don't know if you
Come on.
mentioned it, if it was for this, was it the license?
No, it's because yes. No, I know where you're going. No, it's because you're going to get an unrecognized command. That's the problem, right? And you need to do your environment variables. Remember, if you don't change your environment variables in setup, it'll never work. You'll always get unrecognized command in your command prompt. And where to do that on Windows, I'm not going to do it today, but you need to go down here and you got to go to advanced, you can start typing advanced system settings on Windows 10 or even on Windows 8, even on Windows 7. And you got to bring up this little window, little dialog box, which is system properties. And underneath that, there's a little environment variables area. If you're using Windows 7, you need to add to the path by double-clicking and then adding a semicolon and the path name, okay, if you're Windows 7. If you're Windows 8 or 10, a lot of times when you double-click the path, both on the user variables and the system variables, it brings up a list of stuff that's already been added to the path, and all you need to do is click New and add a new path to the system path, if you will, right, for your node and your GitHub. Right? If you don't do this, you will never have an operational system. Who has this problem? Who has unrecognized command in their command prompt right now? You do? We need to fix you. Can you fix them? Go ahead, fix them. One of you guys. Yours not working either?
I got lost when you got the command prompt part.
Yeah, because now I got a different thing than you got.
What do you got?
I got this, which reminds me, I got this.
All right.
I don't know what, it won't do it. I can't, I pressed all of them.
All right, so we have to go around. So on the break, right, we're going to take a break in a second. On the break, I got to go for it. But what I'm going to do is actually, let's offer this. Let's not do configuration changes on the break. Let's take 5 minutes, take a break, and then when we come back, we'll do some actual PHP. And for people who have configuration issues, meet me at B230 at 5 o'clock, right? And from 5 to 6, I can handle all your configuration issues one-on-one, right? Let's not do it here in this class. It's going to waste everybody's time, okay? But that's the major issue. The major issue is configuration headaches, okay? All right. Oof. Now that we've got everything up on GitHub, please download lesson 2 because I'm going to go from lesson 2, all right? Please don't try and generate lesson 2 on your own. Go up on my GitHub, which is github.com/Georgian College. Download lesson 2, and then let's go from there, okay? Because I think it's important for us to go kind of start at the same place. So everyone has the same errors, right? Take a look at lesson 2. I've got index.php, right? And if you get this little error up here on the top, right, don't worry about it. I've installed on my Visual Studio Code, I've installed a couple of extensions. One of them is the PHP extensions here, PHP debug, PHP code format, PHP extension pack, PHP IntelliSense. These are all extensions to help me get some code hinting for PHP, okay? There are some issues with when we're using this though, and like I said, I'm gonna move towards PHP Storm probably within about another week or so, okay? So just watch for that. For now though, this is okay. All right, so here's the difference. If I make my site files index.php, is there any difference right now? Does this look like a PHP file to you? No, right? This looks like a regular HTML file. That's what it looks like, right? However, when you're running on a PHP server, remember we talked about PHP as an embedded language, right? I want you to make the majority of your files, whether they use PHP or not, have a PHP extension, all of them, right? Because it's much cleaner from the server perspective. If you make some of them that have HTML and some of them have PHP, the server is going to respond a little differently for everything. And I kind of liken it like this. You're playing a game, right? And the server can offer you sometimes 90 frames per second and sometimes 40 frames per second, right? But it's inconsistent. Is that a good game to play? 90 and then 40, and it kind of jumps around. You have different latency when you're playing the game. Is that good? I'm just saying, is it good? The answer is no, it sucks. It sucks to have different frame rates when you're playing a game. It's inconsistent behavior is what I'm going with, right? Better to have crappy consistent behavior than good and bad inconsistent behavior, all right? Doesn't matter whether it's in gameplay or in an app, right? So my recommendation is if you could only run at 40, but everything ran at 40 frames per second, at least it's running consistently. You can have your expectations are maintained, right? So too for PHP, because remember what PHP does. It goes to the server, right? Whenever I have a PHP call, any kind of get or post request goes to the server and does a round trip over and over again for PHP. This is why sometimes PHP is very slow. It keeps doing this round trip. But if I do round trip for some stuff, and I just don't do anything from the other stuff, I just kind of serve it up locally for the other stuff, it's inconsistent behavior. And when it comes to security, there's another aspect right there as well. So please make all your files from now on as we go through this PHP as an ending. Now this is bad because if I ever try and do anything like emit, like I did earlier, like some kind of shortcuts. So if I do something like, if I go into my body tag and I want to do something like a div tag, right, with a that contains an H1 tag and press tab, I get nothing. My emit is disabled typically, right? Except now it worked, finally. But typically it's disabled. And if I do something like an H1 tag with an ID of my heading, right, it should give you something like this, right? That's good for code hinting perspective. Before, I'll tell you, up until this, I would say this quarter, last 3 months, when we ran with PHP and Visual Studio Code, it gave you no code hinting with HTML whatsoever. And that's why sometimes what we do is we run with HTML first, get our HTML structure cleaned up, and then convert to PHP, and then add the PHP code afterwards. PHP is a pig. I don't like it, right? But we have to learn it, and it's the most common language. 8 out of 10 backend websites use PHP. If you don't know PHP, you're hamstringing yourself. You're kind of killing yourself, right? From a job perspective. There's so many aspects of PHP that can be good. For example, building a WordPress site, you can make a lot of money with WordPress, right? Because WordPress is quick and dirty to put together, and you can create a CMS, content delivery system, if you will, right? Content management system, as well as e-commerce websites very quickly with WordPress, right? And it scaffolds out your code very quickly, right? PHP on the back end, right? So we can't discount it. We can't say, well, I don't like the language, so too much. Too bad, I'm not going to use it, right? So PHP is that, an embedded language. And I want you to think of it this way. Whenever we use PHP, before I get into the PowerPoints, I can do it in a couple places. I can do it at the top of my code up here. And the way I do it is I kind of go kind of less than question mark PHP. I can start it off, right? I need to end the statement like this, question mark greater than, right? Anything between this less than question mark PHP and question mark greater than is a PHP block of code, okay? I can do this anywhere in my page. Doesn't mean that I should do it anywhere on my page. It just means that I can, okay? When we declare variables in PHP, we need to use a $sign. So $sign means it's a variable. You do not have to use the var keyword like you do in JavaScript. It's not required, right? When you declare a variable in PHP, it's case sensitive. We're going to talk about that. That means you can't, if you make a change in the variable that's slightly different, there'll be two different variables there. And PHP, you need to use semicolons. There is no option to omit semicolons in PHP. You must use semicolons, all right? So if I do something like name, and I set it to Tom, semicolon, and if I go age, and I set it to 25, right? Like this. Because 25 is a number literal, and this is in quotations, PHP uses type inference to determine the type. Name now would be a string, right? And age would be an integer, okay? Because of the way we set it up. However, and this is the bad thing about PHP that I'm going to tell you right from the get-go, which makes me crazy. If I want to do something like this later on and recast name as something like, I don't know, 50, I could do that. Makes no sense, but I can. And that's the challenge when we use PHP. PHP does not give us any kind of code hinting to let us know something is wrong, right? It just says, okay, you want to assign 50 to this variable? Done. That's bad. There's no checking. That means we can make lots of mistakes with PHP, right? And we have to be very meticulous with our code standards. What I mean by that is, please comment what you're doing, so when you go back, someone can look at it and go, hey, no, but you meant to do this, and you're doing something else. PHP is C influenced, which means it takes the form like very similar to other C style languages, with curly braces for functions and other things like that. We're going to be talking about that as we go forward, right? Same thing with for loops. If I type for as an example, if I tab out, now this is for, right? Right? So how do I do for loops with PHP? Can I do one of these? Can I do a C style for loop for, count? Again, I'd have to use the $sign count, right? $sign count is equal to 0, where count is less than, I don't know, 50. Can I do count plus plus? Do you think this works? Right? This is like a C style for loop. And can I make it so that, age plus equals to 5? That's going to be a very old guy, right? Let's go back. Plus equals to 1. Or plus plus. Would this work? We'll take a look. See if we get an error, right? We say, no, Tom, nice idea that you got going on there with the for loop, but not in PHP. It says syntax error, unexpected, kind of the curly brace, right? So we're going to learn how to do things differently in PHP. We think this is C-style language based, but there are some issues. How about this? Maybe there's a problem with my semicolon. Is that the problem? Right? No, right? I need semicolons for everything, right? But this here, my friends, is not the way we do for loops. Not truly. And we'll talk about why this is and what we could have done differently, how to structure this in a different way for PHP. PHP is a little different than you think. Now it goes away. All right. Now, if that's true, if I want to print it out, how do I print out a value? Well, I can use PHP anywhere. Remember, PHP is meant to be embedded code. It's meant to be embedded code. That means I can embed something anywhere I want. And a good example of this is, if I want to do something like this, I can create a label, right? I could do this. There's a label. And inside my label, I can put in PHP, right? I can do one of these, PHP. I can close it off. And inside my PHP, I can do an echo, and I can talk about the $age, right, that I talked about before, right? I could do this. What am I doing here? I'm saying, hey, take PHP from the server, grab the value of age, which is up here. I've defined it as age, and that it's incrementing for 50 times. So this guy should be about 75 years old at the end, right? And then put it into echo is equivalent to print. Print it in right here inside the HTML. Inject it into my HTML. How is this good? This is a bad thing, not a good thing, right? Yes. Or is that a hand, or was it? You know? All right, you can hit your head. You're allowed. Let's try it, right? Let's try this out. How do I try this out? No, I need to put this in somewhere where it makes sense, right? So there's a couple ways I can do that. I can set up an alias for my COMP1006 W2017 lesson 2. I could do that, right? Or I can drag and drop this. Now we'd lose Visual Studio. I'm going to close Visual Studio Code for a second. But we can drag and drop this into the www folder, right? Remember my www folder? And then I'll take a short break after this, okay? Because we're all dying. Well, in my www folder, in my WAMP, on the WAMP side, here's my www folder. I could take this thing right here and drag and drop it in there, right? And when I do, now it's considered a project, right? How do I know? If I go to localhost, and if I go to localhost by itself without anything, none of this stuff here, localhost, I get this, right? If I scroll down, I see that there's a project there. And if I click onto it, then I get something wrong, right? Site can't be reached, lesson 2. So there's some kind of error, right? And it's not giving me any errors up here. If I look for in the inspector under my scripts, right? I want to look at my inspector and see what my console is telling me. I'm not getting a console error here. There is no issue with this thing, right? And lesson 2, did I save it? Let's go up here and make sure that I saved that file, right? Remember, I had an error with my for loop, right? Here it is. I'm not getting an error now, right? But yeah, who cares about this? But really, I mean, I'm trying to do a calculation. Let's just take this off. How do I comment out? What do you think, if it's a C-style language, how do I comment out multi-line comments on this thing? What do I do? Right? Same thing. So I can do one of these, right? And I can save it. So I've saved my file. You can see that it's saved. Now if I go back to the web and look at localhost, and if I go down here, how come it's not working again? It's not working, right? It's giving me this. Site can't be reached. Is my WAMP server running? Yes, right? Do I have to restart all services? Just asking, right? So I'm putting it out there to you guys because, right, you're like, wait a minute, what are the things that I need to do, right? Okay, now about refreshing now. Does it work now? No, so that's not it. So what's causing this issue? Can't be. That's impossible, right? That's a Star Wars reference, huh? Can I do what with index? It's named index, yeah. It's the index.php, right? Index.php, so it's not that. How about if I just remove the PHP and see what happens? So what if I remove it all, right? Is the PHP causing me an issue? Well, let's see. If I kind of take it away, this is the way you test it, right? You say, well, if I take the PHP away, right? So I kind of comment this part out altogether. Actually, I can't do this. I have to do this, right? So there's no PHP there. And you know what? I'm going to take this little part out over here because this might be causing me the issue, right? Let's just take it out and see what happens. How about now, right? Is that enough? No. Hold on a second. What's the problem here? What about my link? Look at my link. Shouldn't it be this?
Oh. That's the problem.
Yeah. Let me undo that change, those changes. Right? Did you guys get the same problem? That's why we create an alias, right? There's 75, right? Because it did the calculation, right? The problem with dragging and dropping in there is it's assuming it's its own website. And there is no alias for localhost, you know, COMP1006-W2017 lesson 2. There is no alias. I can't just do this. I can't just do this. Because even though I can try and get there, there is no website out there that's this, right? I need to put it localhost in front of it, right? And if I don't remember, that can be a point of consternation. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll do more PHP, more exciting stuff with PHP.